Username Evil Mouse. Don't sweat it, dude. I'm sure it's an ad, right? Username Evil Mouse. What's gonna happen? Worst case, you get a shot. Username Evil Mouse. Maybe you found the one. The one that gives you an incurable rash. I couldn't stop laughing. My best friend Liam had woken up in a hotel room this morning after getting blackout drunk at a bar last night with no memory of how he got there. Naturally, I was doing my part to comfort him. Username whatever, screw you, Ben. Username whatever. Go ahead and laugh your ass off. Just wait till I get my test results. If I come back clean, you'll be the only virgin left in our crew. Whatever. You damn choir boy. I was lying on my bed, phone in hand, a huge grin plastered across my face as I read his text. But when he hit that nerve, my smile vanished. A surge of anger made me type out a long, defensive paragraph, but after a few seconds of deleting and rewriting, I realized he was right. I never sent the message. Instead, I just punched my pillow a few times. What could I do? I glanced at the full-length mirror standing by my bed and instinctively ran a hand through my hair. That's a handsome guy, I muttered to my reflection, who looked like he'd just stepped out of a magazine. How is it possible nobody's tried to get with him? As I was admiring my own face, my phone buzzed incessantly. Would you give a rest? I yelled at the empty room before grabbing the phone. A Patrick Star avatar popped up on the screen. Without even reading the message, I let my fingers fly across the keyboard, hit send, and then performed the sacred ritual, block, delete. Goodbye. I fell back onto the bed, spread-eagled, and closed my eyes. Without the constant buzzing, the world was finally quiet. Meanwhile, standing outside a downtown clinic, a bundled-up Liam Miller stared blankly at his phone. The last message from Ben had just popped up in their chat. Username Evil Mouse. Besides the full screening, you should probably see a proctologist, just in case. Why would I need to see a proctologist? Liam mumbled to himself. He repeated it twice before the realization hit him like a ton of bricks. His face flushed a deep crimson right there on the clinic steps. He furiously typed a reply and slammed the send button. A big red exclamation mark appeared next to his message. He couldn't hold it in any longer. He tilted his head back and screamed at the sky. Even Joel, his outburst drew curious stares from passers-by. He coughed, pulled the brim of his baseball cap lower, and stormed into the clinic, seething. Back in my room, I was blissfully unaware, trying to relax. Suddenly, a slipper flew through the air and smacked me in the face. My eyes snapped open to see my mother, Stella Cole, standing over me. She was holding a plastic hanger in her left hand and a laundry pole in her right, her face a mask of pure fury. I scrambled back against the headboard. Peace, I come in peace. Mercy. Shouting was a mistake. It was like I'd flipped her on switch. The hanger and the pole came raining down on me. After a few symbolic whacks, she sat on the edge of my bed looking at me with that classic and my greatest expression. I watched her stare at me for a long moment before clearing my throat. What? You see a $sign on my forehead. Do you know why you're almost 30 and still single? She asked. Ignore my sarcasm. I flicked my hair confidently. Obviously, because your son is too handsome for his own good. She just rolled her eyes and looked away. After a moment, she turned back. Honey, old Mr. Baker has a granddaughter. Why don't you just meet her? Here we go again. The latest round of matchmaking had begun. I casually picked my nose and flicked the booger away. Not interested. You little brat, she said, winding up with the slipper again. I dodged it just in time. I hated the last one you set me up with, I yelled, finally letting my frustration out. And I'm not even talking about the train wrecks you've introduced me to. Girls who were already pregnant. Girls who were clearly just looking for a green card. And what about 2 days ago? Mr. Anderson's granddaughter. She was twice my size, and I'm pretty sure she was 6 months pregnant. I spent 2 years in med school, Mom. I could spot the 6 months pregnant and still going on blind dates. The more I spoke, the more agitated I got. I crossed my arms, resolved I wasn't falling for her tricks again. This time I was quick enough to snatch the slipper out of the air, but I wasn't ready for the palm strike that followed. You brat, and stop trying to diagnose people on dates. Bottom line, she declared, you're going to this one whether you like it or not. I argued back. We went at it for a good 10 minutes, and in the end, I won. The price of my victory, I locked her inside the house while I was granted the freedom of the great outdoors. I immediately started calling my friends, the guys I'd grown up with, but as luck would have it, every single one of them had either been threatened by my mother or was grounded by their own parents. All my bank cards were frozen. Suddenly, I had nowhere to go. I just started walking down the street with no destination in mind. I walked, and before I knew it, I was standing in front of City Hall. I watched couples walking in and out, glowing with happiness. When a brilliant idea struck me. She wants me to get married. Fine, here's a building full of people. I'll just grab a random person and get it over with. Decision made. I started walking toward the entrance. Just then, a black Audi SUV that had been parked down the street suddenly pulled out and drove toward me. I gave it a curious glance, but figured it had nothing to do with me. I kept walking, and the Audi got closer. The next thing I knew, I was in the back seat. Magic was my first thought. The whole process, grabbing me, pulling me in, shutting the door, took less than a second. Then reality hit. Kidnapping, organ harvesting. The words flooded my brain. I squeezed my eyes shut, trembling. Hey guys, I didn't see your faces, I swear. Just let me go. Silence. I waited for a response, but got nothing. Swallowing hard, I slowly cracked one eye open and looked beside me. A man in a crisp suit and sunglasses had his arm wrapped tightly around my shoulder. He didn't look like a kidnapper who kidnapped someone in a three-piece suit. I breathed a small sigh of relief, but I was still completely bewildered. So why did they grab me? The man finally spoke, his eyes fixed straight ahead. Kid, this is your lucky day? I gave him a pained look. Mister, I was just minding my own business when you threw me in a car. How is any of this lucky? You'll see when we get there. And that was it. He clammed up again. I sized him up. He was built like a linebacker. My chances of escaping were basically zero. All I could do was play along and wait for an opportunity. The second they opened the door, I'd make a run for it. Forget about any lucky day. I just want to keep my kidneys. I stared out the window as rows of trees blurred past. The farther we drove, the denser the forest became and the fewer cars we saw. We were heading out of the city. A knot formed in my stomach and I gripped my pant legs tightly. I silently cursed the man next to me until the car turned onto a narrow private road. After a few hundred yards, we reached a guard post where they had to show ID. It took several minutes before they let us pass. We went through 2 more checkpoints, driving through a dense forest of maple trees before a modern mansion designed like a European manor came into view. This had to be the destination, but what struck me as odd was that the whole place was decorated. There were festive ribbons and enormous floral arrangements everywhere. It looked like it was set up for a wedding. I glanced at the man in the suit confused, but he remained motionless, staring straight ahead. The car finally stopped in front of the main entrance. 2 lifelike stone lions guarded the door, and ivy clung to massive white marble pillars, giving the place a sense of timeless grandeur. I stared at the ornate entrance, a flicker of déjà vu hitting me. I felt like I'd seen this place before, sometime during my days. The suited man had gotten out of the car before I could react. A large hand shot out and grabbed me by the collar of my shirt. He yanked me out of the car without a word. Hey, I can walk on my own, I yelped as pain shot through my neck. He ignored me completely, continuing to drag me toward the entrance. I stumbled along behind him, my collar choking me. Inside, the corridor was lined with gold-veined marble and works of art were displayed every few feet. But what was jarring was a giant red satin bow tied around the pillars and railings. We passed through the corridor and entered a vast, open-plan great room. I saw a figure in a business suit standing with their back to me, a cascade of black hair falling over their shoulders. The man who had been gripping my collar finally let go. He bowed his head respectfully toward the figure on a couch. Ma'am, he said, we brought him. My heart clenched. What did this man want with me? All those news stories about black market organ transplants came rushing back, and I swallowed nervously. A cool, commanding voice came from the couch. Good, you can go. I watched as the giant of a man turned to leave, and I could have sworn I saw beads of sweat on his forehead. Seeing that, my own anxiety spiked. I started imagining some terrifying scarred villain sitting on that couch. The heavy sound of the front door closing echoed through the room, leaving just the 2 of us. My heart was pounding in my chest. Then the woman's voice filled the silence. Ben Cole, age 27. At age 6 you gave a girl in your kindergarten class a dead bouquet of flowers you found in a cemetery. At 8 you filled your neighbor's pool with jello. At 11 you cut off your lab partner's ponytail because you said it was a fire hazard. At 16 you and Liam Miller foraged for wild greens and ended up weeding 2 acres of a farmer's prize-winning corn crop. At 19 you got in a Northwestern At 23, you graduated top of your class and have been living off your parents ever since. She paused. You've had a very colorful life, Ben Cole. Every word from that cool voice made my heart skip a beat. How does this woman know everything about me? I thought, feeling a cold sweat trickle down my forehead. Just then, the figure on the couch stood up and turned around. The moment she faced me, I swear I'd already picked out names for our future children. She was wearing a tailored black pantsuit. Her eyes were cool and sharp. Her thin lips curved into a faint, knowing smile, and her flawless face held a hint of amusement. And her legs, my God, her legs went on for days. I couldn't look away. Want to touch them? She asked. Yes, I blurted out before I could stop myself. Realizing what I'd said, I immediately backpedaled, waving my hands frantically. No, 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 I said with a nervous laugh. To my surprise, she wasn't angry. She walked closer, studying my face. Not bad looking, she said with a smile. Get ready, we're getting married tomorrow. She turned to leave. My brain short-circuited. I grabbed her arm. Wait, hold on, what? Marry me? To who? It all clicked. The decorations, the festive atmosphere. It was all for a wedding, my wedding. She turned back, a perfectly sculpted eyebrow raised. Didn't my driver tell you, you're marrying me? I was kidnapped off the street. What could he possibly have told me? I just shook my head, my face a mask of utter confusion. She waved a dismissive hand. It's fine, now you know. She pulled her arm free and started walking toward the grand staircase, leaving me standing there speechless. I might have been desperate enough to marry a stranger despite my mom, but not like this, not as some guy's unwilling groom. For all I knew, I was being set up to be some other guy's replacement. The thought spurred me into action. I caught up to her in 2 strides and grabbed her hand again. On pure instinct, I put 2 fingers on her wrist, just like I'd learned in med school. My brow furrowed, no signs of pregnancy. So why the rush to get married? When she turned to face me again, I felt that jolt of attraction, but I pushed it down. I looked her straight in the eye, my voice firm. I am not marrying you unless I'm mistaken. We just met. I don't even know your name. How could I possibly marry you? I have some dignity, you know. She didn't seem surprised. She simply tilted her head toward the front door. The door's right there. You're free to go. I stared at her disbelieving. They go to all this trouble to abduct me, and now she's just letting me walk away. Really? I can just leave? I asked. She nodded, a playful glint in her eyes that I completely missed. I bolted for the door. As I crossed the threshold, I glanced back. She was just leaning against the railing, smiling at me, not saying a word to stop me. Without a second thought, I ran out. Just as she'd arranged, the guard at the gates and all the checkpoints waved me through without an issue. 2 hours later, I was standing on the side of the road staring down the empty lane, praying for a car to appear. I was exhausted. Who the hell lives in a private forest that's dozens of miles long? 2 hours of walking, and I hadn't seen a single vehicle. A few minutes later, I heard the roar of an engine from around a bend. I felt a wave of euphoric relief and immediately stepped into the middle of the road. Just as I'd hoped, a sports car screeched to a halt in front of me. I ran around to the driver's side and tapped on the window. When I saw who was inside, my joy evaporated. What are you doing here? I asked. She took off her sunglasses. Excuse me, you're the one who jumped in front of my car. I had nothing to say to that, so I just turned and started walking again. But like a shadow, she followed, the car crawling along beside me. Hey Ben, she called out the window. This is a private road. You've got another 10 miles before you hit the main highway. You'll be walking all night. She paused. You could just give in, you know. Hearing that I still had 10 miles to go, I started to waver. My original plan was to marry a random person to shut my mom up anyway. Marrying her wasn't the worst option. More importantly, I'd been walking for 2 hours and my body was screaming at me. Marry me, she said, her tone suddenly all business. I'll give you $100,000 a month. No other responsibilities, you just have to show up for the wedding tomorrow. My ears perked up. 100 grand a month with no strings attached? I was a trust fund kid, but my parents kept me on a tight leash, and now my cards were frozen. I was broke. I stopped in my tracks and turned to face her. Are you serious? She gave a firm nod. I didn't hesitate. I opened the passenger door and slid in. You could have led with that, I said as I buckled up. If you'd said that from the start, I wouldn't have walked a single step. You never asked, she replied coolly. That shut me up. The car fell silent as we reached the first guard post on the way back. She shot me a teasing look. "What happened to your dignity, Mr. Cole?" "A man's gotta do what a man's gotta do," I said without missing a beat, "and right now, my dignity is telling me to cash in." She stared at me for a second, stunned, and then burst out laughing. Watching her laugh, I felt that strange sense of familiarity again. I couldn't help but stare. "Like what you see?" she asked. "I do," I admitted. There was no point in being coy now. We were getting married tomorrow. Playing hard to get would just seem fake. My directness seemed to fluster her. A faint blush appeared on her cheeks. When she noticed I was still looking, she quickly turned away and muttered, "Pervert." I heard her even though she said it quietly. "When a flower is that beautiful," I said, looking at her profile, "it would be rude not to admire it." After that, neither of us said another word. I turned to look out the window, but I was sneaking glances at her from the corner of my eye. I was nervous as hell. I'd never used a cheesy line like that in my life. If I had, I probably wouldn't still be single. I saw her blush deepen. Combined with what I'd learned from taking her pulse earlier, I was willing to bet she'd never even been in a relationship. A small triumphant thought crossed my mind. The old saying was true: nice guys finish last. A little game is what wins them over. The sports car pulled up to the castle-like mansion. I followed the fast-walking woman inside, the sound of my shoes echoing on the marble floors of the golden-lit corridor. She led me on a winding path back to the great room. As she was about to head upstairs, she seemed to remember something. She stopped, pulling back the foot she had placed on the first step, and turned to face me. I looked at her confused. She extended a hand. "My name is Elizabeth Baker." I realized I still didn't know her name. I reached out and shook her hand. "Ben Cole." After that brief moment of flirty banter in the car, she didn't seem so cold anymore. Our handshake was brief, and then she turned and headed up the stairs. Watching her go, I thought to myself, marrying her might not be so bad after all. Once her silhouette disappeared, I was left alone in the enormous room. It was only then that I realized I hadn't asked where my room was. But looking up at the empty staircase, it felt rude to just go up there now. I shrugged, sighed, and slumped onto the couch. The decor was exquisite, but the room felt cavernously empty. I hadn't been sitting for more than 30 minutes when an angry voice boomed from the entrance hall. "Elizabeth Baker, get out here right now. You are no daughter of mine. Who told you to email all my business partners about a wedding tomorrow? I told you to meet my old friend's grandson, and you refuse." The voice got closer, and I looked toward the corridor. A man in a perfectly tailored black suit with glasses and slicked back hair strode into the room. He looked like an older male version of Elizabeth. I immediately knew this was her father. The moment he saw me, he stopped yelling. He frowned. "And you are?" "My name is Ben Cole," I said, my voice steady. "I'm the groom for tomorrow's wedding." "What did you say your name was?" "Ben Cole, sir," I repeated. "Oh, Ben Cole is it?" His tone shifted from contemptuous to pleased. I looked at him confused, and even his glare seemed to soften into something almost fatherly. I had no idea why he had such a sudden change of heart. Just then, Elizabeth came down the stairs. She moved swiftly to my side, pulling me behind her as she confronted her father. "Dad, this is my life, and I'll make my own decisions. I would rather marry someone I choose than be forced into a setup with someone you picked." She laced her fingers with mine, held our joined hands up for him to see, and declared, "This is my choice. And besides, the cat's already out of the bag. I'm marrying him tomorrow, and that's final." Her words shocked me. I stared at the back of her head. When did the cat get out of the bag? I must have missed that part. Her father was clearly stunned too. He pointed a trembling finger at me. You. Elizabeth nudged me with her elbow, signaling for me to play along. I snapped out of it and stepped forward. "All right, that's right. The cat is very much out of the bag. We hope we have your blessing, sir. Do you have any idea what it takes to marry my daughter? It's not just about money. You need talent. You need..." Elizabeth cut him off. "We've already discussed it. After we're married, I'll support him. He won't have to work." Mr. Baker's eyes widened. He looked at me with a smirk. "A little young to be a kept man, don't you think, son?" I met his mocking gaze heated. What can I say? The doctor says I have a weak stomach. I can only handle the soft life. I looked calm on the outside, but inside I was panicking and screaming at Elizabeth. "I know that was our deal, but you don't just announce it to your dad. Couldn't you have been a little more subtle?" After my comment, Mr. Baker froze for a second, then let out a hearty laugh. Elizabeth turned to look at me, clearly trying to suppress a smile. My stupid joke had completely shattered the tense atmosphere. When Mr. Baker finally stopped laughing, he gave Elizabeth and me a long, meaningful look. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out. Elizabeth and I exchanged a puzzled glance, wondering what that final look meant. "What did you and my dad talk about before I came down?" she asked. I had no clue what had just happened. "Nothing. He just asked my name. That's it." Elizabeth turned toward the door, muttering to herself. "That's not right. He should have argued with us for at least an hour. This is weird." I watched her stare blankly at the door for a moment. "Hey, don't overthink it," I said, trying to be helpful. "Maybe he had a change of heart, decided to stop interfering in your love life." My well-intentioned comfort earned me a sharp glare. "Are you the one who knows my father, or am I?" She snapped. His reaction was not normal. "I bet he's planning to pull something at the wedding tomorrow." She put her hands on her hips, annoyed. "No, I have to be ready. I can't let him ruin this." With that, she turned to head upstairs, leaving me alone in the great room again. "Hey," I called out, grabbing her shoulder to stop her, and then it happened. I felt something give way under my hand. I quickly pulled my arm back. I saw Elizabeth's back, her hands clamped tightly over her chest. I swallowed hard. "Sorry," I whispered. "I didn't mean to. I was trying to. It was an accident." I stood there awkwardly wringing my hands. When she turned around, I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing for the inevitable slap, but it never came. I cautiously peeked through my lashes. Elizabeth's face was beet red and her chest was rising and falling with her rapid breaths. I gave her a sheepish smile and scratched the back of my head. In a flash, she lunged forward and sank her teeth into my shoulder. The pain was sharp and intense. "Ow, let go, that hurts." "Ow, ow, ow." It felt like she was trying to take a chunk out of me. After what felt like an eternity, she finally released her grip. I breathed a sigh of relief, but before I could recover, she lunged again, this time biting down hard on my other shoulder. "Jesus, are you part dog? What's with all the biting?" I didn't dare push her away. I knew this was my fault. A few moments later, the little monster finally let go. She looked at my two shoulders as if admiring her handiwork, shot me one last venomous glare, huffed, and then ran up the stairs. "Hey, what about me?" I yelled after her. "Where am I supposed to sleep tonight?" She didn't answer, just kept running up the stairs without a backward glance. "Well," I said to the empty room, "looks like it's the couch for me." I flopped down onto the sofa, landing right on the fresh bite marks. A jolt of pain shot through me, and I hissed. What a mess. That woman was definitely part pit bull. She bit so deep, she nearly drew blood. I lay there nursing my wounds and silently cursing her. Unbeknownst to me, a figure was crouched just outside the front door, listening intently. It was none other than Mr. Baker, who had shed all pretense of dignity and was pressing his ear against the heavy wood. Hearing my yelp of pain, he shook his head, stood up, and straightened his suit. "That Cole boy is in for a rough time," he muttered. "Even I don't dare to go head-to-head with my daughter. He just had to go and provoke her. A black belt in Krav Maga is no joke." With that, he walked to his car and drove to another smaller villa on the estate. This house, with its classic brick facade and traditional architecture, suited his personality perfectly. Inside, a study filled with antique furniture, Mr. Baker lit some sandalwood incense and settled into a large armchair with a contented sigh. He kept repeating a name to himself, a wide grin spreading across his face. "Ben Cole." He pulled out his phone, found a contact named Stella Cole, Ben's mother, and sent her a photo he had sneakily taken of me earlier. A second later, his phone rang. Before he could speak, the voice on the other end cut in. "That's my son in the picture. Why do you have a photo of him?" "I took it just now," Mr. Baker said, beaming, "in my daughter's house." "What's my son doing at your daughter's house?" Mr. Baker chuckled. "Not only that, but I'm sure you received the invitation to her wedding tomorrow. Your son is the groom." He continued, his excitement growing. "Can you believe it? These two kids, neither one willing to meet the other for the date we arranged, and now they've skipped straight to the wedding. I don't think either of them knows the other is their intended blind date. Let's just keep quiet for now. We can tell them the truth after the ceremony." Mr. Baker was practically roaring with laughter by the end. Soon, he was joined by a peal of laughter from the other end of the line. "Okay," Stella said, "let's do it." They discussed a few more details. Mr. Baker recounted his entire conversation with me word for word. On his end, he was all smiles. On Stella's end, Her smile faded and her expression became rigid. Shortly after they hung up, Mr. Baker leaned back in his chair, marveling at how small the world was. Tomorrow's going to be fun, he said to himself before closing his eyes to rest. Lying on the couch in a great room, I was completely oblivious to the fact that my own mother and my future father-in-law were plotting against me, and that Mr. Baker had already thrown me under the bus. I stared up at the ornate golden ceiling until the intricate patterns blurred and I drifted off to sleep. In a drowsy haze, I sensed a figure moving in front of me. Acting on instinct, I reached out and pulled the person into an embrace. Their bodies stiffened in my arms, and the sudden tension shocked me back to reality. I shot up from the couch. Sure enough, the person I had just pulled into my arms was Elizabeth. Before I could say anything, she spoke first, her voice rushed. Maybe you should sleep upstairs with me. The couch isn't comfortable, and we are getting married tomorrow. Her voice got quieter with each word, but I heard her loud and clear. I swallowed hard. Are you sure? It's up to you. If you prefer the couch, that's fine too. She turned and ran up the stairs. Was I going to back down now? Hell no, I followed her. When I walked in her bedroom, I was expecting a minimalist black and white color scheme, something as cool and severe as she was, but the room was a sea of pink. A pink desk was neatly arranged with an army of pink stuffed animals. The bed was covered in them, and even the curtains were frilly and girlish. Talk about a contrast, I mumbled. That night we didn't do anything. We just slept in the same bed. The next day, the wedding went off without a hitch. Mr. Baker didn't cause any trouble, though I did find it strange that every time he looked at me, he had this knowing, deeply amused glint in his eye. I didn't understand why until it was time for the family photos. The moment the camera shutter clicked, the truth hit us. In the photo, Elizabeth and I were the only ones with expressions of pure shock. Everyone else was beaming, especially my new father-in-law, who was laughing the hardest. Elizabeth and I sat through the rest of the reception. After the last guest had left, we turned to our families who were all gathered in the great room. What's going on? We demanded in unison. My father-in-law was clutching his stomach, howling with laughter. Mr. Baker Sr. and my own grandfather were clinking champagne glasses. My mother shot me a glare before turning to chat happily with my new mother-in-law. No one paid any attention to us. After standing there awkwardly for a few minutes, we gave up and went back upstairs to our room. The second the door closed, we stared at each other. You're Mr. Baker's granddaughter? You're the son of my dad's friend, Mrs. Cole? Even though the answer was obvious, we both had to ask. We both nodded. When you did that background check on me, I asked, did you somehow miss that part? She rolled her eyes. I just needed to find a guy to marry, so I only checked to see if you were a decent person. I never thought you'd be his son. This is hilarious, I said, a laugh bubbling up inside me. One of us was running from a blind date by marrying a stranger, and the other was doing the exact same thing, and we ended up marrying each other. I couldn't help but marvel at the absurdity of fate. I don't care about any of that, I said, getting serious. You still owe me 100 grand a month. Compared to the ridiculousness of our marriage, I was far more concerned about my allowance. Elizabeth smiled. Fine, whatever you want. Just then my dear father-in-law yelled from downstairs. Come down for cake. Hearing his voice, I finally understood his sudden change in attitude last night. You must have guessed who I was from the very beginning. I gave Elizabeth a wry smile and held out my hand. Shall we, my dear wife? Let's go have some cake with your father. Elizabeth took my hand, and we walked downstairs together. The moment I reached the bottom step, my mother, who had been lying in wait, grabbed my ear and dragged me out the front door. A weak stomach, is it? Can only handle the soft life. Huh? She had a slipper in her hand. I don't know where she got it, and she punctuated every word with a whack. Of course, standing right there, laughing his head off, was my father-in-law. It was pretty obvious who the snitch was. As I dodged my mom's attacks, I glared at him. Just you wait, old man. When you're on oxygen, we'll see who gets the last laugh. 2 years later, a tennis ball whizzed past my head, missing my scalp by an inch and smacking against the wall behind me. Cold sweat dripped down my forehead. Ben, our daughter needs her diaper changed. Can't you see she's been crying for 10 minutes? Yes, on it. I looked at my wife, who was casually munching on an apple in one hand while bouncing another tennis ball in the other, and nodded frantically. Just then, my phone rang. It was Liam. The lucky bastard, he'd tested negative for everything 2 years ago, but had missed my wedding as a result. He still thought I was single. I picked up our daughter with one arm, expertly changing her diaper, and answered the phone with the other. Hey man, wanna grab a beer? My treat. We'll find you a nice girl tonight. I promise you, choir boy. He was still single while I was buried deep in the tomb of marriage. Ben, I'm tired. Elizabeth's voice called from the living room. Come rub my feet. I lowered my voice into the phone. Can't. I'm a family man now. I hung up and ran to my wife's side. It was only after we got married that I finally understood why that huge bodyguard had been sweating bullets in her presence. The woman's combat power was off the charts. I learned that lesson the hard way after several trips to the hospital. In the beginning, I'd foolishly tried to fight back, which only resulted in more severe beatings. I learned to swallow my pride. The $100,000 that appeared in my account on the first of every month made the humiliation a little easier to bear. As I knelt on the floor rubbing Elizabeth's feet, I couldn't help but feel a pang of nostalgia for my single days. But there was no going back now. The end.